Hey there, everyone. This is St Denis, the FF Mad Scientist. I am the Cleveland Browns correspondent for High Point Sports, and today I'm here to discuss the Deshaun Watson injury and the impact it has on some of the fantasy relevant assets and the team in general. Um, Not only was it announced that Deshaun Watson will miss the remainder of the season with shoulder surgery to repair a broken bone in that shoulder, they've later followed up and said that they will be going with Dorian Thompson Robinson at quarterback and not PJ Walker. So I guess the bad news got even worse. Dorian Thompson Robinson is not who I wanted to see in. I know he's a rookie and only made one start, and there's potential to improve, but he did not look good in that one start he made earlier in week 4. Um, he did look good in the preseason. The athleticism is there. It could have just been a really bad matchup against the Ravens in that one start, but we'll look at some of the numbers here and kind of take a look at what I think is going to happen here moving forward. So in the 5 games with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, he threw 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. The Browns were 4-1 and averaged 26.6 points per game. They beat Cincy, Tennessee, Arizona, and Baltimore, and they lost to Pittsburgh. With PJ Walker at quarterback, they were 2-1 with 26 points per game, so only about a half a game less. He threw 1 touchdown but 5 interceptions, so the passing numbers aren't great. They beat San Francisco, which is impressive, and they beat Indy, and then they lost to Seattle. In the one game that DTR was at quarterback, they lost to Baltimore and only scored 3 points. He had 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So clearly, you see Watson is the best of the three for the offense. It's a slight downgrade to Walker. He seems to have less touchdown upside, and they rely more on the running back. DTR, like I said, it's tough to tell. Terrible matchup in the one game he did play. You can't really fault him first game as a rookie, so who's to say, that he can't improve? So we're going to take a look at the 4 relevant players I think that could be impacted here, and we'll start off with Jerome Ford. With Watson, he was averaging 14.58 points per game in half PPR scoring. This is all half PPR. He was averaging just about 16 carries, 62 yards, and a fifth of a touchdown with 3.5 catches and 19 yards receiving. He was borderline RB1-2. So he was good. He was definitely much better with Watson. He was a slight downgrade with PJ Walker. He was averaging 12 carries for 65 yards and about a quarter of a touchdown. He was at 1.5 catches and 10 yards per game in the receiving game. He was a low end RB2, mid range RB2 on most weeks, so still usable, but a noticeable downgrade. In the one game he played with DTR at quarterback, he had 9 carries for 26 yards, 5 catches for 19 yards. So he didn't have the yardage in the passing game, but he had by far his most receptions on the season, but he wasn't very good as a rusher. So he went from a borderline RB1-2 with Watson to an RB2 with PJ Walker, and he was nothing more than a desperation flex. With Dorian Thompson Robinson in the one game. So if nothing changes here for Robinson, Jerome Ford is, more like an RB3 flex type running back for the remainder of the season, unless DTR really makes some strides forward. Next up, we have Amari Cooper. In the games with Watson at quarterback, Cooper was averaging 5.5 receptions a game, 96 yards, and a half a touchdown for 17.5 points per game in half PPR. It was a high-end wide receiver too most weeks. With PJ Walker, he was averaging 4 catches for 73 yards and no touchdowns with 10.6 points per game. He was a wide receiver 3. The main difference there were similar numbers, a little bit better with Watson, but the touchdown upside with Walker wasn't there. So he was downgraded about 10 to 12 spots. With DTR, it wasn't pretty. He had 1 catch for 16 yards and 2.5 points per game and was completely out of it for fantasy. So this is one where I think Cooper has hurt the most. The downgrade from Watson to Walker killed his touchdown upside. The downgrade from Walker to DTR is just, it completely kills all fantasy production he has. Like I said, unless DTR is able to make some strides forward here, I would like to get out on Amari Cooper as quickly as I can. He's probably a flex at this point at best. Next, I'll take a look at Elijah Moore with Watson at quarterback. It was 4.5 receptions on average, 35 yards, and a fifth of a touchdown for 8.28 half PPR points per game. He was a flex at best. PJ Walker came in. It was about 3.5 catches a game, 36 yards and no touchdowns, 6.67 points per game, so a slight downgrade. He went from desperation flex option to bench player emergency flex option. Either way, not all that reliable. With DTR, he had 2 for 20 and 0 points, 0 touchdowns. I mean, wasn't great. He was droppable at this point. He might be droppable in all 3 cases, but DTR looks to be by far the worst. So, after a good week 10 for Eli Moore, it doesn't look like it's going to get any better in week 11 with DTR at. I'm going to close things out with perhaps the only Cleveland player who actually benefits from this. That would be tight end David Njoku. With Watson at quarterback, he was averaging 4 catches for 35 yards and 0.2 touchdowns for 8.72 points per game in half PPR. He was a high-end tight end too in that range. With PJ Walker, he was also averaging 4 catches a game, but his yards went up to 51, almost 52 yards per game, and he was averaging 12.5, 13 points per game. He was a low-end tight end 1, borderline tight end 1-2 range. In the one game with DTR, though, he had 6 catches for 46 yards and no touchdowns, also about 12.5 points per game, and was, again, a low-end tight end 1-2 borderline. So, Njoku seems to benefit from the 2, less talented quarterbacks who are more prone to checkdowns and conservative play. And Njoku is the one who could potentially, be the beneficiary of this Watson news and the change at quarterback. So in the end, from a fantasy perspective, I don't think DTR is, worth streaming. You probably want to stash him in some super flex leagues, but I don't really have any interest with him. Njoku, I think, becomes a mid to low end tight end 1, probably around tight end 10, I think, in that range. Eli Moore is a desperation flex option at wide receiver at best. Amari Cooper is probably closer to a wide receiver 2-3 borderline at this point. And Jerome Ford is a low-end RB2 for me, I think. If you want to talk actual NFL implications, I'm looking at the Cleveland schedule here, and it's nothing all that crazy. Like, they've got the Steelers, Broncos, Rams, Jags, Bears, Texans, Jets, Bengals. With the exception of maybe 2 of those offenses or 2 of those teams, there's a lot of weak offenses and some, decent defenses. I think the Cleveland defense is good enough that they can hold tight and they'll be able to score even with DTR at quarterback, just enough to win a lot of these games. So I don't think this threatens their chances of making the playoffs. I think they're still pretty easily a playoff team. I think they're still capable of winning the AFC North. I think the only real impact this is going to have is when they get into the playoffs and they face the more high octane teams, more specifically KC. I don't see DTR being able to keep pace with any of the high-end teams. So I think the Browns are still going to be an easy playoff team. They're a good team. They're going to win a handful more of these games. I only see really, I would say, 2 games. I could see them losing to the Jags. I could see them losing to the Bengals. I can see them winning the rest of their games. So I think it's still a good possibility of a high playoff seed here. I just don't know how long that playoff run is going to last with the quarterback issues here. All right. Well, like I said, I'm Aaron St Denis, the FF Mad Scientist. Catch me on Twitter at FF Mad Scientist. And you can follow High Point at H Point Sports on Twitter. Once again, I'm Aaron St Denis. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, everyone.